To start off this documentary, I want you to picture this. The day is Chinese New Year. A hot pot filled to the brim with authentic Chinese dishes is sitting on the table. The television is showing CCTV's annual Chinese New Year celebration show. The house is decorated with red lanterns, door couplets, and upside down Fu letters. Everyone is eager to move past a tough year. This year's Chinese New Year, though, did feel a bit somber. With the ever-present COVID-19 pandemic, it became the main conversation topic along with questions about colleges, relationships, and politics. The possibility of returning to China to celebrate the New Year was no longer an option. Reports of anti-Asian hate crimes have flooded the recent news, and they too spilled over into the conversation at dinner. I initially struggled to establish a purpose for this documentary. But after observing all the negativity around my culture, I decided to make this documentary to show the beautiful aspects of Chinese culture. By shedding light onto the diverse experiences of both Chinese Americans and international Chinese individuals, I hope that this documentary can provide a deeper look into a culture that has been evolving for centuries. It is important to mention that the Chinese American experience is not representative of the Asian American experience. Asia is a continent with dozens of countries in it, and its mix of cultures should not be generalized into one country. However, because this documentary is a product of inspiration from my own experiences, it is solely focused on the Chinese American experience. Though, as the producer of this film, I encourage my audience to talk about and express the intricacies and the complexities and the beauties of your culture and contribute to the conversation. This is merely my piece to the narrative. As some members of the audience may know, this documentary is for my Chinese independent study during the second semester of my senior year. Though all the preparation for this documentary was in Chinese, for the sake of clarity for the audience, the majority of this documentary will be in English. Anything in Chinese will be subtitled in English, and anything that is my portion of the documentary, for example, like me talking to you right now, will be subtitled into Chinese. And now, without further ado, I present to you Beautiful Culture, a documentary about the Chinese American International Chinese experience. So to me, being Chinese American is an integral part of my identity. As a child, my friends used to call me Hannah Montana, just as a play off of my name. And I ended up embodying this, through a lot of the stuff I own. I had a Hannah Montana rug, I had like all the merchandise, I had like the drawing kits, the clothes, I even had the blonde wig. Though now that I reflect back on that, it seems like, how we know Hannah Montana as the best of both worlds. I kind of see myself as that, except with, the Chinese culture and American culture. Throughout my childhood, I struggled with my identity a lot. I was told that I was too Chinese to be American, and I was too American to be Chinese. I didn't have the resources to know that I could be both, hence, the name Chinese American. But in the meantime, before I learned, what Chinese American meant, I desperately tried to integrate characteristics of both cultures into my life, and that was extremely hard for me. Now today, I am proud to say that I am a Chinese American. I have been able to find that part of me. So for our first segment, we'll be focusing on Isabella Ann's story about how, not necessarily how she discovered, but how she reclaimed her identity as a Chinese American through a very special trip to China that she's going to elaborate in her interview. So enjoy.
Hi, I'm Isabella Ann. I'm from Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, and I go to Union County Academy for Allied Health Sciences. I like to read and write in my free time. I also play volleyball. I also like to listen to music a lot. My favorite genres of music are like K-pop and C-pop. I also like hiking and just like being in nature in general. But I'm not able to do it as much as before. I am excited to talk about my experiences as an Asian American.
The first thing, I just want to get a feeling for where you're from. So, describe your environment. Is it, or your school environment or your living environment or just a community in general? Is it predominantly white? Is it a diverse mix, or is it like a different like dynamic whatsoever?
My living environment or my community, my hometown community and my school environment are actually a little bit different because I don't go to school in my hometown, because I go to a magnet school. So I went to school in my town since like from I think first grade until like eighth grade. So it was predominantly white. And I think there were only a few other um, eh, kids that were people of color. But in my high school and the school I go to currently, it's actually very diverse. And I think the majority of students are probably people of color, although there are white people as well. When I was going to school in Berkeley Heights, my hometown, I didn't really, there was nothing that around me in my environment that kind of introduced the Chinese American side of like my culture to me. Like, outside of like going to Chinese school, which is not a part of my actual school, I didn't really have an interactions with my Chinese, like the Chinese background of my identity, which is not in its of itself like necessarily bad. But I think definitely in my town there have been cases of like racism and microaggression against not just Asian Americans, but people of color in general. And I think that kind of environment, although maybe I was too young to kind of understand it, was part of the reason why I wanted to go to the high school that I'm at currently. The summer before I got into this high school, I think it like the summer before ninth grade, I actually went back to China and I attended like a 2-week camp in Jingdezhen, which is this is like a little town in like southern China that's kind of famous for making like ceramics, if you've ever heard of it. That kind of experience definitely opened my eyes to like my Chinese culture and background that I wasn't ever introduced to before. And I think I was lucky enough to be going into a high school that was so diverse and welcomed so many voices from different cultures that while exploring the Chinese identity that I had just been introduced to, I wasn't really feeling like I needed to, keep it hidden or I needed to hide it from like friends or teachers even, who might, belittle me for trying to accept that part of my identity.
Why don't you elaborate a little bit on when you went back home to China in ninth grade? I think that was really cool. Would you say this is, I guess, quote unquote, the birth of like your realization of this, or is this just something that just kind of led up to it? Or like, would you mind talking about that part a little bit?
Going back to China in ninth grade wasn't the first time I was introduced to my culture. I attended Chinese school and I went back to China like every other summer almost, ever since I was like in kindergarten, I think. So I definitely had that exposure throughout my childhood. And then, but when I went back to China, um, when I was younger, I didn't really have like a grasp of what the culture was because when we weren't like just being tourists, I guess you could say, I mostly just stayed at my grandparents' house, and I didn't really like go out and see any other part of China through the lens of someone who actually lived there rather than someone who was visiting. Going to Jingdezhen was like that was what helped me so much to kind of open my eyes to like Chinese culture, because the camp was like not just me visiting a place but actually me living there for 2 weeks, like functioning like a student who would live in China normally. And we actually got to meet Chinese students, so it was nice. I didn't just like visit places, but I also got to learn about the culture. I remember we took many calligraphy classes, which I was not good at, but it was fun seeing other kids who are also Chinese American, like kind of excel at this thing that we hadn't really ever learned about before. We also had classes on like the formal ceremony of Chinese tea, parties, which is very niche that now that I'm saying this, but I feel like it was such a memorable experience because I had never known that there was a ceremony that you had to go through. And it was interesting to see that side of the culture because I also didn't know that like Chinese people valued courtesy and respect and, tradition. I mean, I did know, but I didn't really appreciate it in that moment, as I did in that moment. We had classes in Chinese pottery, obviously, because if you're going to Jingdezhen and you don't learn about that, it's kind of sad. um, so I got to make Chinese pottery, and I wasn't good at it either. I don't think art is like my calling, but again, it was nice to see fellow Chinese American students like kind of excel at it and like learn about how the designs that were so intricate and like mysterious to me when I first went there to kind of like appear like before my eyes. Like people did this stuff. And I think that kind of personal connection. And we also got to talk to a lot of the people who like lived in around the area, like who worked and like lived their daily lives as a Chinese resident in Jingdezhen. And that again, that personal connection, I think, was what introduced me to really being a part of the Chinese culture rather than just visiting it or rather than just seeing it and learning about it. It wasn't the first time I was ever exposed to my culture, but it was the first time I really came to appreciate it on a personal level and think of it as mine. Um, and so from that point on, I started learning more about like what it means to be a Chinese American and also how Chinese culture and my background can kind of carry over into living in America.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue because my next question was, how did that actually, like when you came home to America and in these past few years in high school, how did that, like what you learned in this in the camp and all this these activities and such, those lessons that you learned, how did you apply them here, or just I guess perspective, like how did you apply them when you came back?
Yeah, so definitely one of the things that changed the most about my perspective when I came back was that I was proud of my Chinese identity rather than, thinking, oh, I'm just Chinese. That's just the fact that I have to accept. It was more of like, I am Chinese and I'm proud of being Chinese. And I will always, that part of my identity will always be a part of me. When I got back to America, I was like, I want to explore more of Chinese culture, not just like what I learned from my camp, but also just as much as I can. This is a truly amazing story about her reclaiming her identity as a Chinese American and a great start to this documentary.
So our next guest for our next segment is Tina Zhang. She will be talking about how her Chinese culture intersects with her life in a predominantly white environment, and how she really steps into both of her cultures and achieving this harmonious balance. Take a look.
My name is Tina Zhang. I am currently a senior at Winville High School, and that's located around like Seattle, Washington. And I will be a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, studying business at the Wharton School next year. A little bit about myself. I have a lot of hobbies. I really, really enjoy like being involved in school. But outside of school, I like playing piano, which is like kind of stereotypically Chinese. I just feel like that. I love playing piano and just like teaching piano as well. And I'm really into fashion and art and photography. So yeah, I just like creating things and interacting with people. I would say are like my two biggest things. I could had an interesting like schooling career, I guess you would call it. But elementary school, I went to this school called Kokani, and it was so diverse. Like I just remember everyone in my class was just such a good mix. Like it wasn't. I would say it was still predominantly white, as in like whites. White people was probably the majority, but there were definitely so many people of color, and we really did emphasize on like culture and understanding each other. We had a whole bunch of like cultural fairs at our school, and we like would always bring in food of our culture. And I don't know, it was just like a really wholesome environment. And the middle school, I would say, it was also quite diverse. There was like a larger Hispanic population at my school, and still like a very large Asian population. Like my twin brother, his entire squad was like Asians, but they were like a mix. They were like Korean, Indian, Japanese, like Asian. It was just like a really good mix. But then I went to high school, and all the people that were majority of people of color were drew into like the new high school that like opened the year I went to high school. So conveniently, all the Asians went to high school. Going into high school, it was I didn't really realize at first, but like it was predominant. It was very very white, and like so many friend groups. A lot of friend groups you would see is just like only white or like a token person of color in a certain friend group. So that was a very big culture shock, and it kind of hit me my like beginning of sophomore year when I just sat down and I was like, what is off? Like something is just really off. People are like nice and stuff, but like what is just different? And then I realized there were like very few people of color. So yeah, high school has been different than growing up, but I still have a really really big Chinese community because my parents are pretty involved, and I went to Chinese school for like 8 years. So I don't know if you did, Hannah, but did you ever have to take Chinese lessons?
Oh yeah, like for oh my gosh, how long? I'm thinking. I think also it was like around 8 years or so, maybe even longer. So like I definitely went on that track. I think a lot of Chinese kids they definitely go through that since like
Yeah.
from little kid to there. I mean that's kind of how I learned Chinese too, a bit, kind of, not really, but yeah. So, but yeah. So speaking on that though, that's actually really interesting. How do you think I mean this would be like my second question. How do you think American culture then has intersected with your daily life and also with your Chinese culture, especially being in a predominantly white high school with so little POCs? So could you talk a little bit about that, but also maybe even your living environment if that has something to do with it as well?
It's really interesting how different American culture and like at least Chinese culture is. I think the first thing that was like a culture shock to me was like in second grade. One of my best friends, she was white, and we lived super close to each other, but we never had meals at each other's house because I think that was like a big cultural barrier. Just because like I just didn't know how it would work out. Like I didn't know how they ate. I didn't know if like she knew how we eat dinner. And then like one time I was just at her house. It was like kind of dinner time, and she was like, "Oh, do you want to like stay for dinner?" And I was like, "Sure," but I was like, I just did not know how to feel about it. And what they had for dinner was like mac and cheese and like bell peppers. And I was like, "Where's dinner?" Where's the not just like the rice? Like I knew not everyone had rice, but I was like, "Where is like the cooked dishes? Like is this dinner?" It was just like not really knowing how to welcome people into my home because that weren't Asian. You know, like when you have Chinese friends, even if you're not like super close, when they come into your house, it just feels so natural. It feels like, they kind of know the flow of things. Like they know to take their shoes off and they know to like say hi to your parents and like introduce themselves, and be super polite and just like, all that stuff. But like, I think I was so hesitant of inviting people to my house because I just didn't know how they would react, or just like it would just be so awkward. So never did that.
I definitely agree with you. It's definitely different dynamic for sure. I think my household's kind of been an accumulation of all of that. Whereas like, they're pretty friendly, it's like everyone's coming in, but there's definitely like when my Asian friends come in and they're like, okay, shoes off, go talk to the parent, all that kind of things. No, definitely. Not only did Tina offer some really insightful commentary on how her Chinese culture intersected with her American culture, but she also brought up a great point, which leads us into our next segment of this documentary, culture shock. So if we're going to talk about the Chinese American or the international Chinese experience, it's pretty important to talk about, the educational aspect of all this. Being a Chinese student in an American education system can really bring up some feelings of culture shock. At my school, we have a good amount of international Chinese students and Chinese American students. However, many of these students, they experience challenges such as a language barrier, a culture barrier, they have to experience jet lag when they come from China. All of these things really impact their educational experience. I mean, personally for me, I was born and raised in Illinois, So I never had to experience a language barrier. But recall how I talked about, me finding my identity. So I had that, I guess, that cultural barrier of trying to fit in into the American education system. The constant questioning of, was I Chinese? Was I American? Without knowing that I could be both was something I had to go through. It wasn't until high school until I realized that, I could be both. And I'm so grateful now that I know that. So, for the first part of the segment, I wanted to talk to my friend Flora. She's an international student attending my school. I wanted to know, why she came to America, what's her experiences living here in America, what challenges she goes through on a day to day basis, and how she responds to them. So, let's take a look.
Hi everyone. My name's Flora. I go to Lake Forest Academy. I'm from Beijing. I've been living in Beijing ever since I was born. I took a few trips to other countries in vacations and stuff. I spent my fourth grade in Palo Alto, California, and I spent my first semester of sixth grade in Jerusalem, Israel. So my English, I would say, is because of those experiences and because of my interest in theater, I would say my English is relatively more native sounding than other Chinese people.
You're an international student because you were born in Beijing and you come here to board here and learn at Lake Forest Academy. But I guess that can be one of your reasons you can cite in response to this question, because I want to ask you, what was your primary reason or just primary reasons for, I guess, quote unquote, moving to America? I mean, you are essentially here for for a greater part of your next 4 years or next year because you're a junior now. So can you talk about that a little bit?
This was I feel like moving now was definitely 90% my choice. My parents were just like, they were like, oh, okay, we're good with it. But moving in general was definitely 100% my parents, or at least my mom's choice, because she was like, you know, I don't really want my kid to be in a country where freedom is limited relative to the US. So she's actually kind of been, or at least she tells me so, she's kind of been preparing me for the, I guess, American experience ever since I was a little kid. So but my reason for coming here when I was in middle school was that I could have better opportunities of, pursuing theater and talk about the things that I want to talk about with other people, and share more common interests. Because in China, the education system, or at least the public school education system, is more focused on strictly academics. Get the grades, get a good score for your college or high school entrance exams, and that's literally the only thing that you do. Whereas in America, you get to explore a lot of new freedoms and new opportunities.
What are some of the biggest differences you've observed between living in America and living in China?
So the first thing, I guess, is that when you at least, well, I guess this is when I was little. Is it all right if I talk about that?
Yeah.
I was in California in fourth grade, and the first single thing that I noticed when I came to that environment was that strangers smiled at each other when they saw each other's face. Literally, people never do that in China. I would say now the biggest difference to me is that I feel like people can be so much more outward here than in China, because in China it's more in China you never see people, how do I describe it? In America, when you speak and you use a medium high volume with your voice, in China it might be maximum the same volume might be considered maximum, but in America it's like medium high. I feel like people in general are just more like they are more physical with each other, and sometimes I guess that's a good thing, sometimes it can be also like not as much of a good thing. Since I feel like since I'm talking about the schooling system, it's like it's very different in China. In China, people are grouped into like classes of 30 to 50 or even 60 people. So everyone has the same set of schedule and everyone takes the same tests and so on. And there's not really that much, like as much opportunity to talk about extracurricular stuff. So everyone would be focused on the same things. Everyone will be focused on, or at least the people who, you know, who want to get into better schools, they would be focusing on, you know, getting those scores. And that's literally the end of it. It's just getting those scores. So for me, I feel like middle school, I could see the competition, but because we were in classes, I felt like, grouped classes is what I mean. I felt like people were, when they study together, or like when they do homework or like whatever, when they're trying to figure out this problem, they always do it together. Whereas in America, sometimes like when I see something that I don't know, I always have this pressure to like figure it out myself. It felt easier to help each other in China in a way. Like sometimes in America, I almost feel like we celebrate individualism too much. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's another great segue into, I recognize that, you know, regardless of if you're an international student or if you're a Chinese American, you're going to go through some culture shocks here and there. For me, you know, I didn't have the language barrier, but obviously like for you, did you go through ESL? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I went through one semester.
Yeah. So language barrier is something. And like, I still observe, you know, how hard it is to, I guess, assimilate into the American culture, because like Chinese and American culture are so different in so many ways, but they can also be similar. So if you don't mind, I wanted to just see what your thoughts were. Like, what types of culture shock did you experience when you came here? How did you overcome it, if you've overcome it? And what, like, I guess, what aspects of culture shock are still with you today, or like just any other comments you have regarding that whole topic?
I don't know if this counts as culture shock, but I feel like I kind of experience it every day. People would reference these pop cultures, and I'm like, what is that? Like, I do not get it at all, because there's just America. Sometimes I feel like America is all about pop culture, and the fact that I speak English like this also doesn't help, because people assume that I know.
Yeah.
Even if I am Chinese, like they would make a reference and I would be like, wait, what is that? And then they'd be like, you don't know this? But you speak English so well. Pop culture is just so vast, and it's so like sometimes it gets overwhelming. I think at one point in my freshman year, I even thought about like getting into everything and like knowing every single thing that Americans know, just so my life would be easier, you know.
So how have you dealt with that today, though? Like, is that same feeling kind of still there, like that extreme, or is it just
I think I just, whenever people like say something that I don't know, that I've never heard of before, I just ask. Yeah,
I think that's really good.
at least it's good to like not pretend that you know it, because I definitely had instances where people were like, oh, do you get this, like when they made a reference or whatever, when they talked about some stuff, and I pretended to know when in fact I did not know at all, which like was, that was not the best. I just, you know, I try to be more honest, that is all.
So not only do I wanted to talk to students that, had experiences of culture shock, but I also wanted to get some added perspective by talking to some of the teachers at my school.
My name's Chris Tennyson. I'm the Associate Head of School and the Dean of Students and Academic Affairs at Lake Forest Academy. This is, I think, year 21 for me here, and so have been here for a while and have really kind of seen the school, I think, transform itself in a lot of really great ways. And one of the things that I always like to say is that, when we created our mission statement back now in 2003, I think it's been something that's been our guiding star, our North Star, if you will, that we've kind of always followed. And we try our best to align ourselves to that mission. And I think it's allowed the school to be really successful. And I think the really cool thing is that Lake Forest Academy has transformed itself physically in the sense of awesome new buildings and facilities and grounds. But we've kind of remained true to that mission. And that's allowed us to not only focus on those pillars, but even more importantly, try to build a truly global school that allows us to to attract students from all over the world, as you said, 30 plus different countries, and create a really beautiful mosaic here. My wife, Maggie Tennyson, also teaches here. So she teaches in the math department, and we have 3 children that we have loved raising on this campus. And so it's been pretty phenomenal to be a part of this community for that part of my life.
My name is Adam Gerber, and I am the Director of International Admission at Lake Forest Academy. I've been here 24 years, so it's been a long time. My primary mission is recruiting for primarily international students to get them to come to LFA and then move on to top colleges around the world. So that's my primary role here at LFA.
I wanted to, hear their thoughts and learn about what they're doing to make my school an inclusive environment for those who experience, language barriers or even culture shock. So let's take a look.
So I'll lead with just something that I always think. I think the greatest thing that we can always do for our faculty is give them the opportunity to travel. And we've sent groups to China I'll focus specifically on China. But we send an admissions team, we send a group of faculty for summer celebrations. We've also been able to take part in professional development and send groups of faculty and staff over to either visit other schools or take part in other experiences. I say that I always think that's the greatest thing, not only because there's professional development and professional growth, but I think being able to travel and experiencing the jet lag that you experience and recognizing that, hey, you know what? Yes, English is kind of in some ways a universal language that people will look to speak, but when getting to a country like China where not everyone is going to speak it, nor should they have to speak it to us, right? That it is an amazing, it's a very humbling thing. And it's also something where it makes you appreciate what our students go through when they come and transition into our community.
A few years ago, we took a group of teachers to China, and just making that 13-hour trip and getting off the plane and having to rush right into a big dinner was a huge experience, and not being able to recover for days. Having that firsthand knowledge of jet lag and what our kids go through as soon as they arrive, and why aren't they paying attention the first couple of days of class? They just can't, and they get it. And then that spread among other faculty members. There is growing awareness for the international student experience. Mm-hmm. And every year that gets stronger among faculty and staff and among our domestic students as well. I think there's more understanding of that and more understanding of culture. I think there's more programming toward understanding difference and understanding other cultures in relation to your own. So every year I think that gets stronger. When I reflect back on where we were probably 20 years ago, it's a completely different school in terms of our appreciation of international students and the difficulties that they face coming here. And I mean, just in the little things of processing registration um, once they arrive is huge, and understanding that kids are going to be jet lagged when they come.
To be honest, even if it was like we had some magical power where we could kind of have them fly over, but kind of like pause time here so that they didn't miss anything, but have to experience the jet lag and, as you said earlier, some of the culture shock of being part of a new place in the world, and not being the majority, right? Which is also something that's really important. And trying to learn how to navigate all of that. It really does allow you to at least get into the shoes of our students a little bit, and that is unbelievably valuable.
I think one of the great things about LFA is our English as a second language program, soon to be ELL program. I think getting kids here on campus early and really working on their language acquisition is key to their transition into regular classroom and into dorm life. I think the language barrier is the first thing to overcome. Mm-hmm. And so I think being able to focus on that right from the start is key. I think helping students get involved in as many group activities that are organic and natural. I think, having international students with American students working toward a community project is key. Be that community service or a house cup competition or a project within the classroom. I think getting involved organically is really, really key. Getting involved naturally, I think, is key to help understand one another.
It's the pros side of, like doing these activities would be probably, making more friends, or like just literally just having the freedom to do so, or like when you do them, you explore your freedom, you realize, oh wow, this is how I can exercise it. This is how, for example, even in AP Gov too, you learn about like your rights and stuff, and you're like, oh, so this is how this whole thing works, and how I can talk about it more, and how I can express my freedom in like these different ways. And in theater too, like when I think people in America are definitely much more adept at expressing themselves than people in China.
I think other parts are, and I think we're going to be really attentive to this year. If you think about it, not only did we have a lot of students not be able to come back to campus this year, but we had a lot of new students who've never set foot on this campus. When we think about our international students, we have to be unbelievably intentional in terms of how we peer mentor them, how we set them up with perhaps ambassador families, how we carve out time to bring them together so that they can get to know one another, so that they can feel familiar with the campus, and just so that they can look around a room and say, okay, these are people that I can go to ask. Here are adults in my community that I can go and ask for help. The last thing that I would just touch on, and I'm sorry for a long-winded answer, but
okay, this is perfect.
I've really been proud of, I think, the students showing some agency and doing some student-led discussions. And I think the Asian Cultural Union, the ACU talk, I think those are things that are like just the start, right? Like, hey, here are current events, or here are issues of importance to us, and we want to create a safe place where we can do that. I talked about this, so we've been meeting with affinity groups, and I was talking about this with another affinity group where I said, what if like once a month an affinity group had our all school meeting where they could get up and talk about their culture and talk about current events and how they're impacted, and make a presentation to the school, where then it's not just one day, or it's not just it's one presentation, but if we have multiple affinity groups doing this, then it's not just a one-off. And instead, we're starting to ingrain it into our culture. We're starting to say, hey, you know what? We're all going to be able to sit here and listen and learn, and understand what it's like. And I think there could be something really awesome that comes of it. But again, I would want the students to be on board with that. You know, we as adults can have great ideas, but really, I want the students to own it because it's best coming from them.
My family is an ambassador family, and we definitely have seen the impact of that, especially during COVID. You know, we helped house around 3 kids because of everything going on, so we know the impact of that. A lot of Chinese kids actually go to my mom because she is kind of that, I guess, a Chinese like figurehead, or like, I guess, like motherly figure that, you know, they're like, there's nobody else here that's kind of like this. So I definitely understand the importance of that. As you said at the very beginning, our mission statement is, you know, multiculturalism, diversity, things like that. And you kind of talked about how we fostered it with this new idea of inviting affinity groups and everything. So, but is there any way you can maybe give some more examples of how we have fostered this environment, and also like how have we integrated not just Chinese international students, but international students as a whole into the community? Sometimes there has been talk about, you know, there is those cliques of international students and then students who are more from the domestic states. But I've also seen, like, you know, obviously times where things have intersected. So could you talk a little bit more about those interactions?
One of the things that we're really trying to be cognizant of at LFA, right, is that, hey, when we bring a really diverse student body together, what we also want is we want students to, when they're around campus, to kind of be able to say, okay, hey, here will I be able to find a safe space, right? Will I be able to find a space where I can talk openly with people who are having a shared experience that I am, right? And a little bit of that is to do it amongst themselves as students, but also to be able to have adults, right, that they can trust and go to. And I think your mom is a perfect example of that. Yes, there are we have some teachers here that are unbelievably caring and loving and all that, but it's also something, right, where, hey, sometimes when they just want a mom, right?
Yeah.
But you can't understate that. I think about this myself, like if I'm traveling in another country, right, there will be times where, like, hey, on a certain day, I just want to go find a Starbucks, you know, and that's weird, but but that's like where I'm like, okay, for that one moment, it's going to feel like I'm back home, or it's going to feel comfortable or safe or familiar to me, right? And I think for the students here, like those students that stayed with you when we closed the dorms and everything, right, for COVID and beyond, and all the support your family's offered them, I think there's such value in that, because in those moments they feel familiar and they feel known and they feel safe and they're happy, and that's really important. And so, you know, as we think about the ambassador program and how we can best support our international students, is really thinking through that and trying with as much purpose as possible to set students up with people that they're going to feel really comfortable with, and that they know are going to understand what they're going through, so that, like, hey, when a holiday comes up that, you know, maybe it's not the most major holiday in the world, but it's still a holiday, that they get a note or they get a treat, right? You know, like those things go so far beyond what we could ever imagine, you know. And so every family and every student comes to us with a goal in mind, whether it's artistically whether it's an artistically motivated one, or an athletically motivated one, or an academically motivated one, and those are not mutually exclusive, right? They can be combined. Oftentimes they are with LFA students because they rock. But it's one of those things where, in the end, where we need to make sure that our families know that we're going to support their child in achieving the goals that they need to. And for students that are coming here from different countries, what's really important is for them to know that we are fully committed to their child's success, and that we're fully committed to being able to help them and connect them with the people that they might need or want to be connected with. A huge bonus for us is that we're close to Chicago and we're close to O'Hare, and the Chicagoland area is a pretty diverse one. So for a good number of our families that come from all over the world, you know, there's oftentimes a connection to somebody locally. Sometimes just knowing that some families have local relatives or good friends is a real plus. Again, it circles back to your mom, that it's just sometimes it's just really nice to get a meal that you know, and just to be off campus and to just know you're going to get cared for in a non-boarding school way, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think like the local thing it's such a small thing, but I don't know like how. I think I saw it first, like firsthand, especially. Actually, it was during, I think, like most of, like, you know, the Lunar New Year's. Like I didn't realize how big of an impact having some local family be able to provide food or the celebrations needed. It's huge because, you know, I didn't realize that until I think I really got knee deep into the LFA community, and also during COVID and everything, when going home for some people was not really an option. Um, you know, that was definitely like a good safe haven there. So I really echo what you're saying. I really like this kind of message of, you know, creating a safe environment and everything, and I think that's definitely what LFA does to a sense.
You know, I think one group that I haven't mentioned really in all of this, but they actually deserve a lot of credit, is the parents, right? To your point, exactly, like the fact that we get parents to bring all of the food, like not all of it, but well, yes, all of it, for things like the Lunar New Year, or for Chuseok, right? Or for when we do the Korean barbecue in non-COVID times in the spring, right? So like all of those types of things are supported by our families and our alums. The Black Student Union had a meal with alumni, and those things, you can't understate the impact and value of those and just how awesome they are. And I'd like to think, and I know that LFA would do all of that. But when you think about these celebrations, they are truly awesome. Again, it's just because of the generosity and support of the full community, you know, and those types of things are they mean a lot. They mean a lot to all of us.
So we talked about parts of culture shock, and we've talked about how, you know, teachers at my school deal with culture shock. But there's another thing that we must address, and that's pressure.
I think it's really hard also for kids from China to come here, because on the one hand, they know the pressure that they're under to get into a top school. And meanwhile, we're trying to pull them into activities that will pull them away from their academics. And I think they've got their parents back home, oftentimes pulling them one direction and us pulling them in the other. I think that is a big challenge, I think, for a lot of our international kids, and Chinese kids in particular.
I was raised to learn to strive to be the best in everything that, you know, I did. It started out with academics. You know, being a straight A student was pretty much the standard for not just Chinese families, but Asian families. But here's the thing. In America, there's like an endless list of opportunities. You know, there's leadership, there's service, there's athletics, other extracurriculars. And, you know, it can get overwhelming when you put a Chinese student who is taught to be the best in everything they could do into the situation. You know, the same mentality of being the best in academics spills over into these additional areas. Yes, they eventually reap the benefits, but is it really worth pushing aside one's mental health?
A lot of kids, Chinese Americans, have to keep one foot in both cultures.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just like the pressure of Asian families, not just with academics, but just like in every aspect. And I think that's like the American aspect blending into the Asian aspect, because in Asia, it's all just about grades, you know, like you have to be top of the class, and all my cousins were and are like striving to be, and that's just like all they care about. And that's kind of what my parents brought from China, because my dad was always like top of the class, rank number one in like every single subject. So he kind of just like imprinted that onto me and my brother, and that's definitely caused a ton of conflicts, especially in my own family. I think like since my brother and I are twins, we're born at the same time, so we go through like school like together, and for a lot of our early childhood we were in the same classes, and then we took a lot of the same like AP classes and stuff like that, and we were just, it wasn't like they ever compared us directly, because I think they're really good on that, but they just saw like, oh, Tina has like 4.0 this semester, like why doesn't Kevin have a 4.0 when he had like a 3.8 or something, which is really, really good. And it's just like that strive towards perfection that like I think is a really, really big difference in specifically I think Chinese households and Asian households in general, but I'm just speaking because I'm Chinese. American culture in school has like so many more aspects to it. There's like sports, extracurriculars, like job and all that stuff, and then just like being Asian, you have to now excel at all those things. Another big thing is like the sense of duty as like second gen immigrant. I just feel like I can't fail. Like it's not an option to me, because like my parents sacrificed so much that the very least I can do is like to succeed. Even though I'm trying to like unlearn that, I don't think I ever could, you know? There's just so much like sense of duty to do just as well and do even better than my immigrant parents. I think a lot of people, immigrant children, probably relate to that.
Every single culture definitely has the pressure aspect of it.
Yeah.
When it comes to Chinese culture, I think every culture handles it differently, of course they do. But in Chinese culture specifically, it's like I agree with that sense of duty. One of the reasons why I chose an Ivy League when I was getting recruited is because my parents were like, I didn't get to go to an Ivy League, so if you got a chance to go to an Ivy League, you should take it, like that kind of thing.
There's a lot going on in the college process world that's become just hyper competitive in a very negative way. And I don't know how we move beyond that.
I agree, Mr. Gerber. This is a situation that we don't really know what to do with, but it's really good that we're finally aware of it. So Mr. Gerber in his interview brought up something really insightful about sports culture.
I always tell new students to get involved in a sport as soon as they arrive. I think sport culture is so much more important, I feel, in America than it is in China. And, you know, in a lot of the public schools, there might be a basketball team perhaps that, or teams per classroom that compete, you know, maybe once a year. But the organized sports that we have in the US is pretty unique compared to the schools in China.
Definitely there's more culture, much more culture surrounding sports than in China. Although there are like a lot of Chinese people who are, you know, like soccer fans or basketball fans, but you definitely see it talked about way more in America than in China.
So I'm an unusual case in my family. No one else in my family really devoted a portion of their time to athletics. And I'm the first one in my family to go to college based on, you know, athletic recruiting. As a swimmer, I don't see many Asian Americans like around me. Whenever I'm on the pool deck, I don't see people that look like me, and you know, I can tend to feel lonely at times. There isn't a lot of Asian representation in the sport, and you know, that's just kind of how it is because swimming is a predominantly white sport. Though today, I'm seeing more and more of Asian representation in the sport, and this is only the beginning of that. Like how we discussed earlier about pressure, you know, that mentality to be the best in everything you could. For me, that mentality for my academics definitely spilled over into my swimming, and it created a balance or a need for me to balance between these two worlds, you know, being the best in academics and being the best in swimming. This was something that, you know, eventually led me to, you know, be recruited for college swimming and things like that. But it was such a demanding feat. It was such a demanding thing to do at the moment. So right now it's around 7:45 p.m. and I'm heading to practice. My practice ends at around 10. Today we are lifting. We lift until around like 8:30, and then we get in the water at 8:45 and swim till 10. I heard that we're doing a test set today, so I don't know what that entails. It's gonna be great. Swimming's a great way for me to, you know, work my body, just kind of get into it and everything. And yeah, I'm gonna bring my all today. So it's around 10:05. I just finished. You can see my wacky hair. Today was 20 100s, freestyle kick, every 5 100s. We dropped the interval by 5 seconds. My legs are dead. I'm so tired, but now I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna take an ice bath. I'm gonna relax, probably get some work done, and then go to bed, hopefully by around midnight or so. This is usually my daily routine. I don't like it that the practices are this late, but hey, gotta do what you gotta do. I wanted to see what other people's experiences in athletics were like compared to mine. So I decided to sit down with another fellow Chinese American swimmer, Sally Ma, to see what her thoughts were on the subject. Let's take a look.
Hi, my name's Sally. I'm a junior at Uni High in Urbana, Illinois. I am an athlete. I swim competitively, and I have for like 9 years or more. Yeah, and I am Asian, proudly Asian.
Describe like your life as an athlete. What is it like? You know, you go to an amazing high school, and then you have an amazing swim career. How do you balance this?
Balancing is a bit hard. Like, as long as you're motivated, you can really do it. If you put your mind to it, I feel like you can do it. There was a time where I was struggling in transitioning, and I wanted to quit swimming, but ultimately I just kept my head down, kept swimming, kept doing everything that I needed to, and it worked out. I dropped a lot of time in that first year, and I kind of stuck with it. I fell in love with the sport again. And I got a clearer picture of what goals I had in like life and in high school, and I think that really helped. And then my parents are pretty supportive. They're always like, you know, this is your life. We're just here to help, raise you to be the best that you can be. And I think that's really, really nice. And then my sister, I have an older sister, and she's like gone through the high school process. She like graduated college, so I can always talk to her. She can help me with anything. And yeah, I think it's just like about finding support in your school community, your swim community, and going from there.
How many hours do you practice a week? How many workouts do you do? You can include dryland if you are, any specifics, things like that.
So I think the pandemic has definitely changed like how much practice time you get. It used to be at least an hour and 30 minutes a day in the pool, for like 6 days a week. And then we would have dryland twice a week for an hour, 15 minutes. But now, recently it was like 55 minutes a day, but now it's an hour and 20 minutes a day.
Okay, that's a lot
Okay.
better.
So it's a bit better, but I mean, it's still not as much as it used to be. So that's like at least 7 to 8 hours a week, probably more. I haven't done the math.
I did not know you guys only had like an hour. Oh my gosh. I know like how much of a difference this does, because I did like only an hour-long practice on my own too. Yeah,
No.
I know. It was painful. I was like, where's my speed? I don't know where it is, but like,
I felt that.
like how do you think, like, I guess like realistically, do you think it's affected your performance? Hasn't really? Or like you can be as honest as you want with it.
I definitely feel like the pandemic has changed my mindset on training. Because we had such little practice time, I really value all the practice time I can get. So I'm in this like new mindset. It's like make every minute count in the pool. Like our practices were shortened, but they were like way more intense in like a shorter amount of time. So it's really just about like putting yourself out there, like really pushing your limits, because usually you would have such a long warm up, but you can't really get into it. You just have to go right away. So I feel like I'm a different athlete now. Like I value all the time I can get in the pool, and I think that's really good. Like I am so grateful that we have more time, because like I think it's amazing that me and my teammates have been able to drop time this season, even though we had such limited practice time. But like we had an amazing season, and now that we have more practice time, I'm just confident that we can do even more.
You as an Asian American, what are your observations about swimming, and like has it ever created any difficulties or no, or like just what are your thoughts on that?
I will say I don't think I've ever received any like discrimination because of my race or ethnicity. I feel like it has really helped me, like my identity as an Asian American. My dad's an official, and he talks to a lot of people. He makes friends wherever he goes, and he always like talks to the Asian people, like specifically Chinese, like parents. And so then he tells me about the parents and then their children, and then I get to know their children. Like me and you, I feel like we're kind of connected by family.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's really cool. So I feel like I feel like I've gotten to know more Chinese Americans and just Asian Americans in general because of my dad, who's an official. A lot of the time, I feel like there's not a lot of representation of Asian Americans, specifically in sport of swimming, which is predominantly white, I think. So I think focusing on that kind of culture and like our identity helps me realize like there's more people like me in the sport, but still like there's not a lot. Like there could be a lot more.
I don't know, like I had this moment. I don't know if you've ever had this moment. It's like where I'm standing behind the blocks or I'm on a podium and I kind of look around and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't see anybody that kind of looks like me.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary. Even in my club, you know, I can only think of like a couple of other people that look like me. How has you kind of finding solidarity in your identity helped you in your swimming career, or if it has, or if it's just like just giving you more, I guess, like comfort within yourself?
I feel like it's kind of empowering to be like one of these Chinese Asian Americans who's like in the sport of swimming. Like there's not a lot, so for me to be doing this, I feel like maybe I can inspire other Asian Americans to also like join the sport, and then over time maybe there will be more diversity in the sport of swimming. But of course, it's just me. I can't like make that big of an impact, but like just like talking to all these people, especially when they're Asian American, I feel like seeing more of them gets me inspired because they look like me.
So we've seen a lot of people talk about their experiences and about their thoughts on certain subjects. However, I strongly feel that the best way to learn about something is to see it in real time, which is why our next segment is about day in the life vlogs. We have two people who will be doing them, Wenny and Annalena. They will be both attending the University of Pennsylvania with me next year, and I'm super excited for you guys to see what a day in their life looks like as a Chinese American. So without further ado, let's check it out.
Hi guys. So I'm a big snoozer. At alarm when I wake up, that was probably my 30th one. If I'm virtual, I'll probably wake up the time school starts, so probably like 7:25, 7:26, and then just log into class. So let's go to the first class, which is AP Physics. Yeah. Good morning. My first class is AP Physics. I'll show you. This is my map. So I'm gonna take these classes. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 classes before my first break. So I guess I'll see you later. And back early. So there was some technology issues during BC Calculus that the teacher actually her screen wasn't loading and then she got kicked out, and then that made me the host, so it was very awkward, but like we left, so we'll see if she texts us just if we can go back, but currently now it's free time, so yes. So it's currently 10:44. I finished my 5th class. Well, I finished early, so I'm currently on break. Usually I would go downstairs to like eat breakfast. My brother cooks for me because I drive him to school. But today I think my brother overslept, so my mom actually made breakfast. Usually for breakfast I usually have like the Chinese like traditional, just like red bean bao, which is called hong dou bao, or pork bao, which is lo bao. For today I had a ta sao tai bao, which is like roast pork veggie pot. So I'm currently on my break, but I think okay, so in 1 hour I will be having a practice FRQ for AP English Literature. So the questions already posted. I'm not supposed to start yet, so basically I'm just going to Canvas and just creating a Google Doc just to prepare for it, because we have like limited amount of time to write, so I just want to make sure I have the prompt ready. I think I just have 1 hour left of free time, so I'm just gonna go on Instagram because I do have something on Instagram to do today, and then like a takeover, and then I think I have some FRQs to do as well. Okay, so I just wrote my essay. It was on paper. I wrote like 2.5 pages. So basically I'm done for the day because I have a free period today, and then I guess I'll just eat and then I'll go to the reviews. So for every bedroom door, we usually have this Chinese decoration that is supposed to bring good luck and prosperity in Chinese culture. So for lunch today, my family had some Chinese food. We made some spring rolls, some bean sprouts, veggies that we put into a wrap, and we also have a dessert like sweet potato sweet that came from my province in Fuzhou, China, and we also had some lamb chops as well. So because my parents don't really speak English, and I usually do code switching, so sometimes I talk in English and Chinese Mandarin with my parents during lunches and dinners. So one thing that my Chinese family and I like to do is we like to have family lunches and family dinners. So um, since I have school, so we don't have breakfast together because they wake up later. But usually during family lunches and family dinners, we usually have multiple dishes in the middle, and we get how much food we want. And they're usually mostly Chinese food. Sometimes we eat pizza, but most of the time they're Chinese food. So we all have a side dish of rice. Today we ate like a spring roll wrap, and the sweet potato. It's part of our culture. I'm from Fuzhou, China, so it's like a sweet potato. Outside, it's kind of like a mochi texture, and then the inside there's like peanuts, like sweet peanuts in there. So we like to have family dinners and lunches together. So because those are most of the time that we have family time together. Since other than that, I'm usually studying or doing extracurriculars or working. And I'm currently going on review. I think I have 4 hours review, so I'll see you later. So for dinner, we had some Chinese vegetables, fish soup, and a side of rice. So after dinner, I will have one more review, which is BC Calculus, which is from 7:30 to 8:30. I already had 2 reviews already, which is AB English Literature and Physics, so I was done with those. After the review, I'll probably be doing some of my homework to catch up, and then go to sleep because I actually have to drive to school tomorrow. But thank you so much for following my day today, and I hope you enjoy. always cry. But have a good morning. No, not good morning. Have a great day or a great night. So that was me just typing out a little speech for high school. I think throughout my high school life, there were times where I was so focused on the grade, like the numeric grade. If I just got a -1, I would be so mad. And then my teacher and I had this conversation, and she was like, you know, you can't let your parents' expectations kind of rule your life. You gotta understand why you yourself are so focused on the number, the grade, and what you can learn from it. So that's a little thing that I kind of looked back on. And then also, as I was looking at what I did or certain values that I have, one thing I would say is that Chinese parents are very humility focused. So I learned that you should never brag about your accomplishments. You should never say, oh, I'm so smart, or oh, I did blah, 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 blah. But in a way, learning to not do that, or refuting when people say, oh, wow, you did blah, blah, blah. The traditional Chinese way is like, no, I'm not smart. I didn't do that. No. Yeah, so when you deny like that, you're kind of denying yourself of that self-validation, which I think is quite important. If you do accomplish something, I suggest that you be proud of it. Be proud of everything that you do. And while it's good to be humble, that is definitely a must in life. I think nobody likes braggers. But also don't deny yourself of that happiness and that joy that you get from doing the things that you do, and be happy about that. So, yeah. Oh, okay. So I went back to writing, right? And basically, I was thinking of the comparison between Singapore and Guam. So I was born on Guam, but I went back to Singapore during my primary school days, which is like kindergarten, elementary, and then I came back from middle school. And so education is obviously very different in Asia. In Asia, they focus on grades only, and grades. So final exams are what constitute most of your education trajectory. And you would get into your next school, so after primary, there's secondary, and that would be based on precisely a number, which is your PSLE exam. I'm sure other countries have different metrics, but the only other way is if you are really, really skilled in a sport or an art, and that would be a specialized track. But I am so thankful for the American system, because I think that I really flourished here. After I came here, I took those values of working hard academically, but I had the opportunity to be more involved in clubs, to explore my own interests, to find that I really enjoyed business and public speech. So after that, my path took off in work experiences, in internships, and people attested to my work ethic outside of the classroom, which is what
I really thrived in. I really thrived in working in those environments rather than just studying. But I did do well academically here because of my upbringing from Singapore. I'm not like the most genius, smart student who gets everything right, no. But learning that hard work pays off and investing that time into studying and doing assignments, basically cultivating good habits from a younger age because of the environment that I was in, ultimately helped me get to where I am now, and it helped me more in the American system because then I could juggle more things and explore more. So I think it was a really nice transition, and the time that it was middle school, especially since then I had 2 years here to adjust to the new system before high school started. And yeah, it was something that I wouldn't trade. I wouldn't say I want to just live in America the entire time, the entire system is great, or just live in Asia the entire time. It's the balance and the way things turned out the way they did, I think, are quite unique and something that I treasure.
So I have the croissant and the
Yeah.
but anything over 700?
How's what?
Hamburger.
Okay.
We got one more minute here. Close your eyes. Walk your hands back towards the center. Or come down with your entire body. Just make sure that the leg that's
We've talked about how Chinese Americans found their identity as a Chinese American. We've talked about the differences and the similarities between Chinese and American culture. We've talked about the challenges of culture shock. But now what else is there to discuss? Well, there's the final question, the main question that drove this documentary. What is so beautiful about Chinese culture? Take a look.
Okay, a very good question. In my opinion, there are so many beautiful things about Chinese culture. One of my favorite things that has come to bring me a lot of comfort is that, and also, actually, this is pretty interesting because this has brought me a lot of comfort while it has also sometimes given me difficulties, but I think that those difficulties have provided me the opportunities to grow and mature. And I think one of my favorite things about Chinese culture is their emphasis on family. I'm a very family-focused person myself, and although family is not perfect, whatever culture you're coming from, I think the Chinese cultural tradition or motto, you could say, of like sticking with your family, being there for them, and holding them accountable, is also a part of that. In Chinese culture, togetherness means a lot, and being together with your family, you guys can all grow stronger. Although we've had conflicts, although there has been a lot of, like difficulties with being Chinese American in America, I think together as a family, we've gotten through it.
I would say specifically for my family, but I think this goes for a lot of Chinese families, like that family dynamic is so important. Like, it's so heavily valued. It's all about, like, maybe they don't show love the same way as in like supportive, like where it's like, oh my god, I love you so much, like here's a hug, here's everything like that. But like you can tell like the small things that they do, all the sacrifices they make, and just like all those little things. I mean, I guess they're not little, like my parents made the sacrifice of like driving to work 45 minutes away so I can go to school here. But like it's really nice of them. But just like all these sacrifices, they add up, and like you can see how much your parents really love you. even if they don't say it all the time.
I think the formality of things also, like just if you look at family structure, every single relative has like a very specific title. It's like your mom's sister or your mom's aunt or your like dad's younger brother. Every single one has like a different name. It's not just like Uncle Joe and Uncle Ted. It's like Bofu and like Da Bofu, and it's just like different layers of things. Maybe a little bit deeper in Chinese culture is just the immense respect for elders. You know, the main thing my parents talk about is like they would never be able to put our grandparents in a retirement home. Like that's the main thing. You have a bunch of kids so that one of them could like take care of you when you're older. And the idea is like, I don't know. I think in American culture, you kind of move out when you're 18 and just like bye to your family, and like they're no longer a big part of you. But that's not how it is in Asian culture. If you were to like turn 18 and then just like leave and kind of like cut things off, even if it wasn't like toxic, if you just kind of like left and were independent, it'd be really rude, you know? It'd be kind of like disrespecting everything that your parents have put into you.
I guess some other things that are less deep and more superficial that I love about Chinese culture is the food. It is so good. I just want to say, American people, like, they're like, oh, I love Chinese food, but you haven't had Chinese food until you taste it in China. And there's like so much good food, like no matter where you go, whether it's like north, south, east, west, China, you will find something that you like.
I think one of the most noticeable things about Chinese culture in specific is just the emphasis on food. I was reading this article by an I think Asian woman, and she was saying how Asian parents' love language is cut fruit, and I was like, you know what? That's actually really true. And like when you think about pull out the fruit, pull out the fruit. Instead of like whenever I call my grandparents, it's never like, oh, how are you doing? It's like, how have you eaten yet today? Like, what did you have for dinner? And I think that's just goes to show how much of an emphasis is on food.
Another thing that's amazing about Chinese culture is that although they don't have like states, they have provinces, obviously, but every single province has like a specific way that they eat food, specific foods that they make and that are really good. There's just so much variety and so many different cultures within a larger culture, and that's hard to do. Like in America, we pride ourselves in being diverse, right? And we are, and I think we do mostly do a good job of integrating cultures together. But in China, this big culture is kind of like finding all these like subcultures, I guess you could say, within a bigger culture, and how that they integrate it together so well is just like really, really amazing. Another thing I love about China and Chinese culture is the clothes. I don't know, like specifically, not like specifically just articles of clothing, but the way that people dress. I think people dress, no matter where you're from, to kind of show themselves as a person in a way that they're showing that no matter what class they're from and no matter what they do for a living, they take care of themselves and they work hard and they're independent people. I think this was most obvious when I went to Jingdezhen. It's a rural town, and a lot of the town's residents are not necessarily within the higher class of China, but none of them ever kind of showed that, you know, through their attire, I guess, that they were struggling or that they were bitter about anything. And they were always dressed very nicely, very proper, and in a way that made you feel like they have a pride in themselves and in what they do. And no matter like how hard their life might be sometimes, they will continue to be proud of who they are. Also, Chinese historical dress is really beautiful. It's called hanfu, and it's like, I don't know. If you search up pictures of it, you'll see it's HANFU. Like the way that they dress in history, Chinese history, throughout every single dynasty, it kind of changes. But whatever dynasty it is, it's so pretty. And I want to go back to China and get a hanfu for myself because I want one. Last but not least, what's beautiful about Chinese culture? For me, this is kind of what kept me in Chinese culture or like continuing to learn about it after I came back from Jingdezhen and I wasn't really there, to learn about it at a personal level. But Chinese music, I know it's Chinese modern music, Chinese pop music. What I like about it is that it doesn't necessarily take only from modern trends, and the lyrics of modern music or pop music are very much still centered on Chinese values that have been there throughout the history of China, which I really like. And another thing that I like about it is that they are not afraid to incorporate like music from like historical eras in China. China has a lot of great musical instruments that are very unique and sound amazing. And when they incorporate it within modern music, that's like my favorite, because I get to hear, I almost get to hear like the history of China's like stories through their people, because music, again, for me is a way to tell stories about your culture or about who you are.
People in China really hold on to their culture and appreciate the arts. Like they want to play like traditional Chinese instruments. They want to learn Chinese calligraphy. You know, I think it's just an all-around appreciation, and you can really see that through the New Year's. I love the language. I think the language is just so beautiful, and my parents used to like force us to learn it in Chinese school, but like towards the end I finally realized how intricate it is, and like just how much power the Chinese language holds and how nuanced it is. Like I would say it is so much more structured than the English language. Like English words, they don't make sense when you pronounce them. Like yacht, why is it spelled yacht? Like what the heck? But in like Chinese culture, Chinese language, it's just like every word is a syllable, and it's just so easy, even though the pronunciation can be really hard for a lot of people.
Literally every single character in Chinese, like they're kind of like a picture and they tell a story, and I think that's really beautiful. I would say because I'm a big like literature / Shakespeare person, I feel guilty every day that I don't like read Chinese ancient poems more, because they just have so much intricacy to them. Like there's just really an unspoken beauty to it, I guess.
Chinese poetry, so beautiful, and the idioms that come with like Chinese language is just so, it can like, you can have an idiom for every single situation. Like my mom's favorite idiom is called 不要脱裤子放屁, which basically translates to don't take off your pants just to fart, and basically that translates to that's so unnecessary, you know? Like the action of doing that is so unnecessary. So it's just like things like that is just so funny, and there's also like really pretty idioms as well that I just can't think of, but I think every situation can be like simplified into a line of poetry. And I would say like maybe the third thing is just how lively the culture and the traditions are. Every single aspect of like Chinese New Year and like 端午节 and the other like celebrations stem from so much history. Like you can trace it back to thousands of years ago, and it's just so beautiful. Like every aspect, like the color red and the zodiacs have such beautiful folk tales to them, and there's just so much depth to everything that if you take the time to really analyze like the art or just any aspect of the tradition, there's just so much to it. Festivities in China are just insane. Like they go so hard. Everyone just goes so hard. We play mahjong, and I'm so good at mahjong. Like I can win. I can gamble if I really wanted to. But, like the mahjong, and then also like the Chinese New Year shows when the holidays come. It's just so cool, and just the all across the board, how almost every Chinese person is like in tune with their culture in some way.
And now there you have it, the answer to the big question of this documentary. What is so beautiful about Chinese culture? So we have reached the end of the documentary. Thank you so much to everyone who watched this. Thank you to all my interviewees, to my day in the life vloggers, to my independent study advisor, Jiang Laoshi. Thank you so much for supporting me throughout this entire process for this entire year. Thank you to Lake Forest Academy for giving me the opportunity to pursue this independent study and making my dreams come true of making a documentary. And thank you to my parents for raising me to realize my identity as a Chinese American that ultimately set me on the road to do something like this. Thank you guys so much once again to the audience for watching. I really hope you guys learned something from this. Go out there, talk about your cultural experiences. Like I mentioned earlier, this is only my part of the narrative. Just like the title of the documentary, Beautiful Culture, let's all share our beautiful cultures with each other. All right, this is Hannah signing out.